The round of 16 has concluded and we're now moving into match day 5, and lots of Euro Fantasy managers are activating their wildcard. But is it actually the right move? In this video, we're going to discuss exactly what you should be doing with your wildcard chip, my current transfer plans, and of course, a wildcard draft ahead of the quarterfinals. As always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you drop a like on the video, and of course, smash that subscribe button. Enough waffling. Let's get into today's video. So first up, of course, we need to look at those fixtures for match day 5. And it's safe to say the Friday fixtures are sensational. I cannot wait for Friday's day of football. But from a Euro Fantasy perspective, it is a little bit of a nightmare trying to understand which teams and players we should actually invest into. So first up on Friday, Spain versus Germany. I think this one is incredibly tough to call. If I had to pick one, it probably would lean towards Germany. But my first impression right now is that the offensive assets is probably where we need to invest our money in if we were to wildcard. And then if we have to, maybe look at defenders in each respective team that are great for ball recoveries, because I think this is a very difficult game to predict a clean sheet for. I think both have proven that they are free scoring teams, but both can be hurt in different ways. I think Spain transitionally can struggle, whereas Germany in the flanks can actually be hurt with Kimmich and both David Raum and Mittelstadt being a little bit indifferent in 1v1 situations. When I look at Spain's strengths with Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal, I think this game could be perfection. I also think the likes of Leroy Sané and Musiala's ball carrying skills against Spain could be causing issues for them. So on the face of it, I do think Spain versus Germany is a game where offensive assets need to be purchased, maybe rather than defensive ones. Portugal versus France. For me, France have been incredibly disappointing. However, we have seen a really pragmatic approach from Didier Deschamps. And for me, I think investing in the defence first and foremost is actually quite a shrewd move. I'd be looking at 2 French defenders in our squad. Portugal, I think this is one that we have a free hit if you choose to, but I think it's also one that you could completely avoid. I'm not seeing enough assets in the Portugal team to suggest that we should definitely go there. Once again, I think if you're going to go there, you either go Cristiano Ronaldo, or maybe you go for a defender who has real high potential of ball recoveries where we can at least get some points if they were to concede. Now, Saturday's fixture may be a bit easier to predict. England versus Switzerland. Now, let's be real here. England are incredibly unpredictable, but if I had to bet on one to progress, I still would go towards England. I know that might be controversial. Netherlands versus Turkey. I think Netherlands are probably the pick of the round in this game. I think they have been actually more impressive than we give them credit for. I think they offer assets both defensively and offensively in this team. So in terms of the 4 fixtures, I think Netherlands are the ones that we can really invest in, hoping that they will come up clutch against Turkey. But it's worth noting, the quarterfinals, it is now a position where it's incredibly hard to predict the results, and it's even harder to suggest which players to go for. So that's the fixtures covered. Let's move on to whether you should actually use your wildcard, and then we'll discuss a wildcard draft for those that are activating it. So I think prior to match day 5, pretty much every Euro Fantasy manager that had their wildcard left said to themselves, match day 5, activate the wildcard and change the team up depending on which teams got eliminated. Well, safe to say, quite a lot of the favourites did progress. When we look at the teams that are in the quarterfinals and the teams that Euro Fantasy managers would have had, I think a lot of people would have had triple Spain, triple Germany. They would have had triple England, for example. France, Portugal players would have been popular in these teams, and also Netherlands players in the match day 4 team. So based on that, and in terms of the first point that I said, I think the majority of the favourites have actually progressed into the quarterfinals, which means a lot of our teams actually look really good going into match day 5. And while they might not be optimal, as I've said here, we all get 3 free transfers where we can use to build our squads. So, for example, I'll put my team up on screen here. You can see Mark Guy is going to be suspended for match day 5, and Sabitzer is ruled out because these have been eliminated. So I could use 2 of my free transfers. For example, I could do Mark Guy to get myself a French defender, and I could maybe get rid of Sabitzer to bring in a Xavi Simons, or I could look to maybe bring in a Spanish midfielder like Fabian Ruiz. Then I would have one final transfer for players that still remain in the competition. And I'd argue quite a lot of my players are still favourite picks in their respective teams. The one that I maybe would look look towards is maybe Alvaro Morata. I could be doing something like Morata to Cody Gakpo, but I wanted to use my team as an example because I think a lot of managers out there have quite a similar structure to myself. And if you're in that position, I think it is really difficult to justify using the wildcard in match day 5. And I think we could actually look at just avoiding it and using it in match day 6. And I've mentioned here, it's due to the match day 5 fixtures, we're going to see a lot of popular assets leave the tournament in the quarterfinals. Spain versus Germany, as I mentioned, a lot of people have investments in both. Well, both teams can't progress in the same tie. So we're going to see quite a lot of German or Spanish players leave the competition. Same applies to Portugal and France. The big thing is, of course, England versus Switzerland. Not many people have Swiss players. So if we were in a situation where England got eliminated, you definitely would need the wild card for the semi-finals with maybe 3 to 4 England players leaving your team. And finally, I think a lot of people are investing in Dutch players. But if Turkey were to have a shock upset like they did in the previous round, then the wildcard is definitely going to be needed with all those Dutch players leaving the competition. So based on this, for me, the wildcard in match day 6, the semi-finals, is actually going to be the best chip strategy for my team. And I actually think for a lot of managers out there, just because of the way the fixtures have fallen. So even though I think the wildcard in match day 5 is totally viable, and we're going to come on to a draft now, I think a matchday 6 wildcard is actually the preferred choice. So even though I am advocating a matchday 6 wildcard, it doesn't mean that we can't build a wildcard squad, because I may even get tempted by it myself if we were to see some rogue injuries announced in the next few days. And I'm also conscious that a lot of people out there watching this are going to be on a matchday 5 wildcard regardless. So there is going to be a lot of benefit in tuning into this section. So first up, we have got Pickford and Mannion. What we have to remember first and foremost is that you have to get your goalkeepers on different days. You can't be going for a Spanish and a French keeper alongside one another. Now, I do think maybe Pickford and going for Costa is also a good combination, but it depends on how you want your defence to be structured. So we will come on to that in a minute. But look, whatever you think about England, I still think on that day, they are still a good investment into your teams. I think Pickford is one of those players that at 5 million is great value. And of course, when you're using your wildcard, we are still restricted to certain budgets. Now, it's worth noting, Verbruggen is also a good pickup for the Netherlands against Turkey. But you'll see in this wildcard team that we got some investment in those defenders who are really offering great value in this tournament. So Pickford's going to be the goalkeeper alongside France's Mannion. As I mentioned, for me, France offensively are not really giving us much to invest in. But I think defensively, the combinations that they got right now of Saliba, who's having an unbelievable tournament, Tchouameni in front of the back line, Koundé, and even Upamecano is looking decent considering he's so error prone, and Theo Hernandez at left back. So I think if we are going to go in on France, it has to be defensively. And with Portugal looking a little bit imbalanced, we could see a very tight affair in that game where hopefully France win it 2-0. Now, moving into the defenders ahead of matchday 5 for this wildcard team. And as I mentioned, I do think if anybody is going to keep a clean sheet in the quarterfinals, it is going to be the Netherlands. So I've gone for the double up of Denzel Dumfries and Virgil van Dijk. I think Ake is a perfectly good pick as well. I think there's been a lot of worries about Dumfries' game time, but apart from the one game there where he was rested, or even rotated, some may say, I think Dumfries' game time is pretty locked in, and we saw that once again in matchday 4. So I think Dumfries and Van Dijk are a really safe pairing against this Turkey team. And we saw them score set piece. I think Netherlands will defend the set pieces a little bit better with the aerial threats they do have in their teams. And it's also worth noting, Nathan Ake did come off around the 65th minute in matchday 4. Could we see that again in matchday 5? Potentially. So I want to get those defenders that are going to play much longer in games because of the ball recoveries across the 90 minutes. Now, currently got Germany's Tar in the team. Now, we need to remember, when we're building a wildcard team, that we can't really have players who play against one another in heavy loads, because when we get to the semi-finals, if all your players are against one another, they're going to get eliminated. So we need to make sure we are cautious with our picks. But Tar will return to the Germany team from suspension. I'm expecting him to fully come in at 4.5 million. It's a really nice investment. Now, of course, we will get the Germany team news before the deadline. So if he isn't starting, we can move it to maybe the left back or even Rudiger if you have the funds available. But we don't in this team. But I do think maybe having a hedge towards the Germany defence is a good move, and not going totally all in on maybe triple France defence, because we do have Theo Hernandez to go alongside Mannion in goal. I think you can go down to Koundé 100%. I don't think there's too much in it, but when I watch Teo Hernandez, he is an all-action defender, and he does get into some fantastic positions in the final third. And as I mentioned, I want to back France over Portugal in this wildcard team. As I mentioned, if we completely split the squad and we go half French, half Portugal, if you're wildcarding in match day 5, when we get to match day 6, half your team is going to be leaving the competition. So we can't really put ourselves in that situation. Now, I've got Pepe in the team, but it is worth noting, this one is definitely up for grabs, this position. 5 million, he is my preference because he's so good in terms of ball recoveries. I think Cancelo and Nuno Mendes are much better in terms of offensive potential, but against France, I'm not really expecting many opportunities for Portugal because France are so pragmatic in their approach. So I think ball recovery is actually more important in this game. And Pepe is a bit of a monster when it comes to that at 5 million. So that's going to be the current defence. Of course, we are leaning towards France and Netherlands progressing in the competition, but let's take a look at the midfielders. Now, of course, picking midfielders is both a tough task, but also an exciting one with the players that we have left in the competition. And again, we need to remind ourselves that we are going to get 4 free transfers for the semi-finals. And again, even though certain teams are playing against one another, I still don't think that should totally mean that we can't go for them just because they play against one another. So for example, Germany versus Spain, the assets are just too good not to go for them in my eyes. Even though you are going to lose maybe 2 or 1 from their respective teams, I just don't think we can totally ignore them. So that's why I've gone for the double up in Spain, Nico Williams and Fabian Ruiz. I think that's the 2 best options in that Spanish attack right now. And I do think Nico Williams is just looking irresistible. And I think up against Kimmich, he is going to cause problems. We saw the same with somebody like a Vinicius Jr. in the Champions League. Tricky 1v1 wingers against Kimmich do sometimes get some joy. And I am expecting the same thing from Nico Williams in that game. Musiala is currently in. I've spoke about this previously. I think his ball carrying ability is going to be absolutely imperative to break through Spain, because Spain naturally are going to dominate possession with the players they have in their team. So when they do look to transition out of those moments, Musiala's ball carrying and of course Florian Wirtz alongside potentially Leroy Sané is a really dangerous combination for Germany that they need to maintain in that team. And also Musiala has just been in fantastic goal scoring form. Xavi Simons is going to come in for the Netherlands midfield. Again, I'm hedging towards a Netherlands victory, so I think Xavi Simons is really important in this team. And finally, we've got Jude Bellingham. Now, very indifferent right now about England in general, but the big players need to step up in these moments, especially when England are just playing poor in general. There isn't many better than Jude Bellingham. I don't necessarily think England will beat Switzerland in the 90 minutes, but I do think Jude Bellingham playing in that number 10 is the best option, because Phil Foden for me could leave the side for Anthony Gordon, depending on what we hear from the journalists over the coming days. So Bellingham for me is the best England pick. And that's going to be the midfield. Let's take a look at the forwards. And finally, take a look at those forwards. And controversially, I've got Harry Kane in the team. I know he's been poor, but still got 2 goals in this competition. And I still think in these big moments, he does step up. And I think Switzerland is going to be a tough game against Fabian Schär and of course against Akanji. But I still back Harry Kane in any fixture. I know that might be some blind bias here, but he is going to be in the team alongside Cody Gakpo, somebody that I just don't think we can ignore right now, especially if you're either doing a wild card or free transfers. I think he's a brilliant option. He's really stepping up in this Netherlands team, a completely different player to what we are seeing at Liverpool, and at his price point as well, it's an absolute no-brainer putting it in our sides. But I do think someone like a Kai Havertz, if you want to go there, is also great. But as I discussed, I personally want to hedge on a certain team, and that is going to be the Netherlands for the quarterfinals. Finally, Kylian Mbappe. Now, controversially, because we should be in a position right now where Mbappe is the first player on the list, but it isn't the case at all right now. Mbappe's been decent in the competition, but he just isn't getting the goals or the assists that we were expecting. And France in general are struggling to create big opportunities for both him and all the attackers in the side. However, I just don't think I can go without Kylian Mbappe in this team. Will he be my captain for day 1? Probably not. I do think the Spanish players are a bit more intriguing, or maybe a Musiala, because goals for midfielders, and it just looks like scoring points for midfielders is a bit easier than forwards right now. So Kylian Mbappe is in, and again, I think it's important because I am hedging towards France as opposed to Portugal. So that is the current Matchday 5 wildcard team if you were looking to do so. The one thing I will say is this, as I mentioned, we're going to get 4 free transfers for the semi-finals, which is match day 6. So if you are activating your wildcard, you do need to remember that you get 4 transfers for match day 6. Do not build a wildcard team where it is completely split across all the teams, because naturally half your team will get eliminated regardless of the results, and then you're going to be using points hits to recoup that in the semi-finals. So for example here, if we get a situation where the Netherlands do get knocked out, this is really bad for this wildcard team, but you do just have to hedge yourself at some point. If you split that and put Netherlands and Turkey players in the team, you're just asking for trouble, because one of those has to get eliminated, and then you are using your free transfers on those particular players. So I think this team's well covered. I think we've got the majority of the premiums in, alongside hedging towards certain teams. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, which players are being missing, and I think this is pretty well balanced. Yes guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's wildcard video ahead of match day 5. I hope it's provided some value, and as I mentioned, you don't have to use your wildcard in match day 5. I do think match day 6 is a brilliant time to do so. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like and smash that subscribe button. If you have any questions, put them in the comments section, and I will be dropping my own team plans tomorrow, because of course I am debating not using my wildcard. So we'll go through what my 3 free transfers will look like in preparation for match day 6. Have an amazing day, and we'll talk real soon. Take care. Cheers.